This video will look at specific note creation techniques, again to help you with better learning and assessments. So first up we have annotating slides and articles. This is a very quick and easy technique and is absolutely fantastic for capturing information in the moment. However, it's not very active, and so while it's good for capturing information, it's not particularly effective at helping learning. You can see here there's a whole variety of implementations you can use for this approach, whether that's a case of printing off the slides ahead of a lecture and annotating that new information you discover, or printing off a journal article and annotating it as you read through. It's helping you to capture your thoughts. You should really put a focus on the new information, not rewriting anything that's already on that sheet of paper. If you are using this technique, the only prep you need to do is to print that stuff out. During, focus on highlighting important points, any questions you've got, or things you want to revisit. And again, focus on that new information and those extra notes, not the things already written down. Afterwards, you need to bear in mind this isn't so much a note-taking or creation technique as a way of capturing information, so you really do need to revisit these notes and do something else with them to help with your learning. That something else could be one of the note-taking techniques that we cover later in this video. Next up we have linear notes, and these are probably the most common note-taking form used across universities and beyond. It's very straightforward and simple, but not really good for recall. So what do I mean by linear notes? Essentially you start at the top of the page and start writing. You may use bullet points, you may use short phrases, generally not necessarily full sentences, but you're capturing information down in a linear order, quite often mirroring the order it was presented to you in a lecture or it was discussed in a book. And here on the right hand side you can see that can be both handwritten or typed up on a computer or tablet. However, that linear order reflects how somebody else thought of that information, how somebody else presented it, and that does not necessarily align with how you see the situation or how it links with your prior learning. So it tends to not be very effective at helping you with your own learning and recall. Again, this is more of a way of capturing information. You may be able to improve that element of recall if you include more colour and images, not necessarily just for the sake of it, but to help you remember things and to help illustrate the learning in different ways. And imagery can be very, very powerful to help you with this. I quite often reflect on a time in which I was mapping the landscape of higher education with peers on my doctoral course, and even that was over 6 years ago. All of those concepts and those ideas stick with me because of the visual images that we associated with it, putting some knowledge on the pinnacle of a mountain because it was established, and other emerging ideas in a murky swamp. But before we digress, let's look at linear note taking and how we'd use them a little bit more. So before using linear notes, try to learn some abbreviations or make them up. Again, your notes only need to make sense to you, so if there's any common terms you're going to use all of the time, find an abbreviation for them. That could be as simple as using PS for photosynthesis or B/C for because, anything that works for you. While you're using linear notes, really focus on being as brief as possible. Again, full sentences are not important. Capture those ideas, phrases and points. And try to leave a bit of padding and space around so you can go back in and add annotations and additions later if necessary. Finally, afterwards, do something else with these notes. Remember, this again is not one of the more active techniques, and so you'll really benefit from doing something else with them afterwards. Next up we have illustrated notes and sketch notes. As you can see, these are very highly visual ways of capturing your notes. There's much more of a focus on visuals than there are necessarily on words, but again those visuals should really tie on and tie in with the words. And quite often those words might be presented in a non-linear form. We've got a few things here where information's annotated around, where it's arrowed or linked in with other things. So it's breaking those linear orders from the annotation or linear techniques, making them more effective. Now, while this is a very time-consuming way to take notes, it's incredibly effective for learning and recall because it's inherently multimedia, and you can include any form of images that either help you remember things or actually demonstrate key learning points. This example on the slide, I think, is a really excellent summary of a talk, and is something that somebody, actually did in the moment. You might not necessarily have the skill to illustrate that quickly, but it does come with time. So if this is something you want to take forwards, maybe practice it with your reading, and eventually you'll be ready to do it when it comes to lectures and seminars. So how do we do these approaches? Well, before, kind of focus on your style a little bit. You really need to be focusing on communication, not necessarily fancy artwork. If you do get a bit too tied up in how these look, they can actually become a form of procrastination in themselves. So your images should be more doodle and quick as opposed to detail and artful. When you are doing illustrated notes or sketch notes, really try to focus on images and keywords. Again, move away from full sentences and try to illustrate connections. You can use colour and be creative, and they should essentially be a bit of fun. And then, much like any other note-taking technique, afterwards you should be revisiting them and doing something else with them to engage in active learning. As with any other note-taking technique, looking and just reading these kinds of notes is not effective to help you with your learning. So reprocessing them and recreating them in different ways is really helpful for that. And on that note, I'm going to pause there, and the next video will pick up and continue to look at some more note-taking creation techniques. Hopefully see you there. As always, don't forget to follow us on social media for news, skills tips and other helpful information. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram and YouTube. Hopefully see you there.